Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a Calypso Mako reel. It's what I would consider the upper end of a low-end entry-level reel. It's a nice solid reel. They've been around for a while. A customer brought this one into me just asking for some annual maintenance. Told me that it's a little tight, and it is a little tight to turn. I've gone ahead and I've removed the line from the spool. I recommend to my customers when they bring these in for annual or whenever they bring the service in, if the line has been on any amount of time, to go ahead and remove it and replace it. And he had some 20-pound monofilament on this one, so he agreed it was time for a change. We're going to go ahead on this one by taking the gear side plate off. Let's go see what's going on underneath there. To do that, you remove the handle nut. This has a pull-through handle, so that unscrews. And what I like to do when I remove the handle is simply put the nut right back into the handle so I don't lose it. And I also like to take all of the parts that I remove from a reel and put them in a parts tray. In this case, it's a bottom of a milk jug, but it'll serve well. So I said this is on the upper end of entry-level reels. This has a bump guard on it, so the purest of the entry levels usually don't. The nature of a bump guard is you can break the bump guard and not break the side plates. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then there should be 4 screws remaining in this. This is not one of those reels where you need to take the spool and rotor off in order to remove the bottom end of the reel. Simply remove the 4 screws and that should come out. And we'll go ahead and do that. These are Phillips head screws, and it's a good time to tell you, if you don't work on reels as frequently as I do, and you maybe have a little bit of trepidation here about, you know, am I going to be able to get it all back together and that, take pictures along the way. Grab your cell phone, grab your digital camera, and just, you know, stop along the way, take some pictures, and that way you know as you come back in to where they all belong. Okay, so I didn't get that 4th one out quite yet. There we go. I'm also noticing as I'm holding this reel that there's a rock in this rotor here. That's not good. That tells me that the nut up top is not tight. So we'll go tighten that down when we do this. All right, I'm removing that. I'm going to push that out now because screws have a habit of getting lost. And again, everything goes into the parts bucket. Okay, so we can see on this one that it is a single ball bearing reel. This is a bushing on this side. And we're going to go ahead and remove the main gear. In order to do that, you have to take the spool assembly out. And you do that by taking the set screw on the crosswind block out. This is a fairly common setup for almost all reels. Some of these reels, you know, differ in how they hold that in, but in almost all cases they use a crosswind block like this. And then once you take that screw out, and you can see it sets in the spool shaft here. Once you take that out, you set that aside. You do not need to take the spool off in order to pull that shaft. And then we can take the main gear out. And this, there's more than the main gear coming out here, which that might be the problem as to why this is operating sluggishly. This bushing on the back, it should, yeah. So there's a, feels like there's a rough spot in that, there is. So we're going to go ahead and just, that's probably why it's not operating as well as it is. This was on the non-drive side of the reel. I'm taking a very small, fine file, and I'm just going to run that across this. There's probably a high spot in this, again, entry-level or a high-end entry-level reel. There's probably a high spot, or there's some corrosion on this that came through because the nut jacket may not have been on and holding that spool tight, and may not have sealed this from salt water, and that may have caused that. I'm also gonna, this has a rounded section on the back of the file. I'm just gonna run that inside here. I don't want to ruin the diameter of it because you'll ruin the efficiency of a bushing. but I do want to just make sure that if there's, and I see some corrosion on this backside here. So that's probably why this reel was not operating as efficiently as they would like it to. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back in now, reseat that bearing, the bushing. So you can usually tell a difference between a higher end reel and a lower end reel by the number of bearings. In some cases it just gets silly. You'll see advertised 5, 6, 7, 10 bearings, 11 bearings. After a while they're just a lot of redundancy. You're putting bearings in where you don't need to put them. But I like to say, when my customers ask me what should I buy at least a reel with 3 bearings. The 3 bearings would be the one in the back, the one on the drive, and then the one under the rotor here, the main pinion bearing. But again, these reels are going to do what you bought them to do. So if you're an entry-level fisherman, if you're not taking a lot of trips, if you're not sure you're going to like the sport and don't want to make an investment of $50, $60, $70, you just want an entry-level reel, then go right ahead and get one of these. And then as your expertise or your love of the sport grows, then you can go back and get an updated or an upgraded version of that. This is the crosswind block here. I'm going to reseat the crosswind block against that gear. There's a little track that it runs in, and I've cleaned away a lot of the grease that was on the this is the original manufacturer's grease. I'm sure that the customer has not upgraded it. I'm just going to put some fresh lubrication in there. It's a blue grease. In this case it's Penn's, and I'm going to just check to make sure all the teeth are here and are okay. I'll set that aside for just a moment. And there's a pinion gear up top here that seems to have a lot of grease on it already. I'm going to just take the older grease off and do the same thing. Going to replace that with some fresh grease there, and I'm going to reseat this main gear into the bushing. And this one on this side doesn't seem to have the same problem in terms of the spinning. So and my guess would be is that became a problem on the other side, and that's why that wasn't working well. Okay, and this little clip just came out here on the anti-reverse tension spring. So we'll reseat that. Again, take the pictures along the way if you're at all hesitant about which way these things are going to go. All right, this one concerns me a little bit. You can see that the screw is loosened up top here. A lot of manufacturers will actually put set screws on the top of these to hold this nut from coming free. In this case they didn't. And here's what we were talking about, a very simple assembly. The anti-reverse is not an instant anti-reverse. It runs on the tongue and groove kind of thing. These are the grooves in the back of the rotor, and as you back off your spool, you'll see this dog is going. So if you're reeling, it stays shut, and as soon as you stop, it throws this out, and this catches the grooves in the back of the rotor. And this one is lubricated fine. This is where your ball bearing is. It's under the pinion, and we're just going to put some oil, your oil bearings, and you lube moving parts. Just a little bit of oil in there, and then I typically like to spin it a couple of times just to work that in, and we're good there. So then we're going to back this off so that we can get to the reinstalling that spool. And that clip just flew out again, and I was very fortunate enough to find that that's the clip for the anti-reverse here when I went to work on that. So I'm going to put that one back in. So we found two things that probably needed to be corrected, so it was a good time for them to bring the reel in for service. The first of this was that we had a sticking bushing on that back side, which I'm sure attributed to the sluggishness in the reel. And this is the second one here. This is the problem we've had with the loose nut and the rock in the rotor. Now this is interesting. This actually turns counterclockwise not your normal righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. It's actually the opposite. And that's because the way the reel spins, it's going to compensate for the spin and not unloosen as you're cranking. I'm just trying to find the right wrench here. If you've seen my my video on how to set your workbench up, I recommend that you keep all kinds of wrenches here because each manufacturer is just a little bit different. Alright, we seem to be pretty good there. So we're going to go back now and reseat this spool shaft, and then we'll get over and we'll take a look up top on the drags. I don't expect to see any problem with the drags because the rest of the reel has been relatively clean here. I would just say that they probably got a little bit of saltwater contamination on that side nut there, and that's caused the reel to get some either contamination in there or get some corrosion going on that bushing, and that slowed the reel down. So we're in pretty good condition with this one. We've re-lubed the bottom of it, so we're just going to tighten this reel back up now, and we're reversing out the process that we came by on the way in. We're reinstalling these side plates. I made a mental note on the way out that all of these screws are the same length. Sometimes when you take a side plate off and you have recessed screws like the ones in this one, you'll notice that the ones on the left hand side of the reel have a recess. Sometimes when you go ahead and take those off, those are smaller screws. So you just you need to note that as you're doing a reel. Now, most of the service techniques that I just did here apply to almost every reel that's out there, spinning reels, particularly the lower end where you don't have the bearings, you only have the single bearing on the pinion. And that's not unusual, right? The Penn Silver series only had a single ball bearing up on the pinion there, so it's not just you know, the reels you're going to find for $20 or $30 that do that. And of course, it's a savings. Bushings are cheaper than bearings, so that's going to overall or ultimately arrive in a cheaper cost of the reel itself. But if you do what I did on just about any entry-level reel, just making a note of where your pieces and parts came from, you should be fine. So now we're going to put the bump guard back on, put the handle back on, and then we'll go up top and take a look at those drag washers there and make sure that the drag washers are not contaminated either, because using a reel like this, particularly in the surf with the beach and sand and salt water, the up top bearing systems typically take the brunt of the salty spray, or if you dump the reel in the sand or you wash it in the ocean as you're landing a fish. Typically the weak point on the upper bearing reels, the upper drag reels, is that the water gets underneath the drag knob and contaminates the drags. And this fella's been fishing inland shore, so we're just going to make sure that these are okay. To do that, you back off that drag knob, and then you'll see that there's a retaining clip in here. Again, very standard for these kinds of reels. You want to take that clip out, and you'll notice I'm holding it here because they tend to fly. And then there's three types of drags. We'll find out which ones we have here. We have oiled felt drags here. So by the nature, these are felt. You have felt, you have fabric like a Carbon X, and you have Teflon. The felt drags get oiled. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my reel oil. Put a couple of dots of oil on that. Then a round washer goes in. Then you grab the second of the felt washers, and these have dried out a little bit. So this is a good service for that kind of a reel if you find out that you have them. And again, not uncommon. You'll find this on the Penn Fierce and the Penn Pursuit. They have oiled felt washers as well. The middle washer in the drag stack is always the eared one. It has the two points on it that sit inside the spool. This washer is very dry. It was the one that was sitting up top. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we have a nice dose of oil on this one as well. The last one is the circular one that goes up top. And then our clip spring goes in. And the clip spring is only designed to hold these drag washers in the stack. There's nothing really going on. It doesn't do anything other than that. The pressure for the drag washers in terms of holding the spool tight comes from the drag knob itself. All right, and then we just we overload that and put that back in on the spool. Grab this, and we're ready for a test drive to make sure that that we've done well here, and hopefully we've eliminated that sluggishness that the customer brought in with the reel. So first thing I'm doing is tightening it, and we're tightening down on the drag. There you go. That's a nice reel. So for the price, it's a value. Like I said, it's on the upper end of the low entry point selling market. It's well designed. The products inside that we saw were nice. It's a smooth operator. This one's good. So if you're only going fishing a couple of times in a season, maybe catfish, this would certainly serve for catfish, or inshore ocean, deep lakes like the Great Lakes, this would work fine. If you're doing a daily fishing, you would probably say, you know, I want a little bit smoother retrieve. I want the instant anti-reverse. Those mean more ball bearings and a higher price. But if you're getting out there just a few times for the season, or if you're keeping an extra reel on the boat, or in the cabin, or in your cottage down by the shore, and you just want to you know, have it available for somebody else who may join you on the trip, I would say that this is a nice reel for the price. So I hope you've learned something from this. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. If you want to see some more, I've been posting a lot of these recently as the reels come into the shop. And if you subscribe to my channel, you'll see these as I work on them. So again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for viewing the video.